Welcome to Rucks, Mauls and Oval Balls. That's right, it's the fans' favourite rugby podcast once again, back with the fans' favourite rugby podcast host. That's right, it is me, Dave, joined as ever by Rory. Rory, say hello to the listener.
Hello, listeners. Hello, David. How are you?
Oh, hello, Rory. I am very well. I'm feeling a little bit... Not a great start point for an audio format, but I'm feeling a little bit sunburnt because I was outside for a little while over the weekend.
I imagine if you were outside for more than 4 minutes, you'd feel a bit sunburnt.
Yeah, I famously get burnt in cloud cover, and that happened once more. Outside of that, anything interesting? We're just trying to get that. We spoke last week about the exciting development of me becoming a DIY masterman.
Yes. Is that still ongoing? Or is everything falling apart?
Everything is still where it was. It's just a continued effort to look at upgrading RMob Dave HQ and maybe a relocation job en route. But other than that, I think that all really is insignificant compared to how your weekend went, Rory. I know the listener is keen to know how. Well, again, fantastic for the audio format here, but Rory has brought a trophy into sight.
I brought props for this audio format, ladies and gentlemen, because I have not given this trophy back to the club because we bloody went and won it. The treble!
Wow. Talk us through the day, Rory.
Well, we were at Old Brentwood's Rugby Club, which is a rugby club that the consensus was none of us had ever heard of. We had no idea why it was there, and we'd never been there before. So that was interesting.
Great.
Nice enough place, though, apart from, the pitch being on the other side of the cricket pitch, so ideal. It was, I want to say, 25 degrees on the day.
Lovely day.
The promised rain didn't arrive until well after the final whistle, so we were treated to yet more car park-like ground to play on.
Fantastic.
But we got the job done, Dave. We got the job done. It was a strange one. I mean, you'd probably argue we didn't play our best rugby of the season. But in that heat, who's surprised?
No, and
when trophies on the line, who's surprised?
It's cup final rugby, Rory.
Cup final rugby, you just got to get yourself over the line. It was 39-24 in the end, if I remember rightly, which I might not because I might have then celebrated for the next 2 days.
Yeah, I'd expect nothing less.
Yeah, I think what's so great about it is on top of finishing the season with the league leaders, the league final, the cup final, the treble. We love it.
The trifecta glory.
Yeah, from a personal point of view, I can't help thinking it's all down to me and my efforts.
You are captain, so
I am captain. We are also, David, and this is almost a podcast exclusive. We're taking the Lions into the leagues.
Oh, we're talking.
We're talking.
That's exciting stuff. That is exciting stuff.
All we need is a mere 8 promotions, and we can get the Lions in the Prem.
Wowzers! So you're entering. So what would that be? So I don't know what levels there are in Essex. Is that
Counties 2, I think it is. So we'll be playing the likes of Burnham, Basildon, Epping, Old Brents, actually, as it happens. Some of the finest names in counties rugby, and specifically the Essex area.
Could argue the only names in counties rugby in the Essex area because they're the teams that play in the counties league in the Essex area. But carry on.
Yeah, if you want to diminish it, be reductionist, David. Sure. But no, we're taking the Lions of the leagues. There's been a new RFU edict about getting lower teams into the leagues, so we can't be blocked this year as we were last year, and guarantees the Lions a competitive season.
That's good.
I'm hopeful of securing a promotion next year. That'd be my goal. I want to get this rocket ship going all the way up straight away.
Fantastic. Well, back-to-back trophies.
Back-to-back trophies. I'm hungry for trophies, David. I've not had my fill.
He's not had his fill. He's not had his fill of silverware. He's hungry for more. It's good as well because that puts away the rumours about potential Raw retirement. That's put to bed. Rory's going at least another season. He's got more silverware in the eyes. He's had 3 tastes of success, and that hasn't done enough to put that appetite to bed. No.
Yeah, I'm not satiated, David. I am I'm taking the Lions all the way to the top.
Oh, God. Fantastic, Rory. This is news. This is the news we like to deliver on Rucks Balls, Oval Balls.
Yeah.
It's this sort of hard-hitting, general, national level interest news that really hits home to the listener, and we'll be keeping a close eye on the Lions' journey through the leagues over the years, and can't wait to get the invite to whenever they have their inauguration into the Prem as the 15th franchise, I'm guessing.
Yeah, look, watch out, Red Bulls. We're coming for you.
Can't wait. Well, that is some weekend, Rory. I'm sure you celebrated in style. I'm sure that trophy smells awful and has had more than its fair share of shared beverages within.
Yeah, rancid. It's rancid.
It's rancid. Fantastic. I wouldn't have it any other way, Rory. That's fantastic news. Now, obviously, we can't talk about the Lions all podcast, as I point out every single week, as much as we'd love to.
We do our best, but we can't.
We do our best, and sadly, the season's coming to an end, so we're going to have to actually fill the banter section with some banter in the future.
Oh, we have to find something to do.
I know. But we are here to talk more broadly about rugby outside of the Essex area.
Correct.
And this weekend was an odd weekend, but we'll touch on a couple of bits of news. We'll touch on a few things that happened in the rugby world. We'll talk about a couple of games that may have happened. And we're also going to touch on... we're going to do a bit of work for Steve Borthwick. That's what we're going to do to round off the episode.
We'll just take one thing off his plate.
We'll take one thing off his plate. But we're going to start off with a little bit of news. And it's not really news. It's more of a talking point based off of a news story that was created out of it. And it's that... it's been spoken about a bit. The Bristol Bears being... could argue having his words taken out of context, but the message was very clear. He basically stated that Bristol Bears exists in a capacity to be a marketing agency rather than a rugby club. I know that's been clarified since then, and he's kind of done a bit of scrambling and pointed out that slightly taken out of context when you consider the audience he was delivering that message to, which I think is all valid and fair. But you can't help but look at the way Bristol Bears are operating and think, yeah, they are trying to operate as a marketing agency, and it's all about image and the marketability of their players. And I think I remember seeing, I can't remember which player it was, but a player said that a big part of their contract discussion was about they need to do more with their digital profile in order to increase their value to the club. Is this the direction that our sport is going in, Rory?
Yeah, look, I've actually got sympathy with Tom Paynton on this one, the Bristol CEO. I think he chose his words poorly. And I think he should have known or should have had some idea of how a statement like that would land with the fan base and the wider rugby public. It's from a media perspective, it's a naive statement to make, but I don't think he's necessarily wrong in his assessment. We've got to stop clutching at pearl necklaces in rugby, and we've got to be more at peace with the fact that rugby clubs are a commercial entity.
Mm-hmm.
Rugby players are a commercial asset.
Yeah.
And like every other successful sport, the game at the weekend is not the only way to drive revenue. There's so much more around it. Like, I think what Bristol have done from a marketing perspective, their social media team for a couple of years was absolutely out on their own from an English rugby perspective, in terms of the type of content they were doing.
Yeah.
I think there's a few others who are producing similar sort of stuff now. But they purely from a Prem perspective, they somewhat changed the game in terms of what club social media could be.
Yeah.
I think rugby has to think differently about how it drives revenue, and the marketability of players is a big aspect to it. Now, he's wrong in the sense that you don't sign players, or you shouldn't sign players based purely on their marketability. But, the examples that are being thrown around are Lewis Rees-Zammit and Alona Meyer.
Yeah.
Now, both incredibly marketable for different reasons, but both very, very marketable players. But is anyone going to sit there with a straight face and say they're not also being signed for their ability on the pitch?
Well, exactly. It's not like they don't come with star quality on the pitch as well as off the pitch.
Yeah.
So I think that's a fair point. And I think I think if they were to start, if they were to sign, a side man, that's a thing, isn't it? A side man, a side man.
Look,
One of these tube
I
users.
think we're both a bit long in the tooth to be talking about which sidemen is the most marketable. I think sidemen are considered old in that world now. So we're probably 4 or 5 generations out of the loop in terms of who's the hot property on the old TikTok. You would know better than me, though. I would think.
But I think Max Brown's probably a name familiar with a lot of people who follow social media rugby content. If he was to all of a sudden get a contract, I know to you that means nothing. But if he was to all of a sudden get a contract at Bristol Bears, that would get called out as being that is a social media marketing agency driven decision, because yes, he could play rugby, but he plays grassroots rugby. If you're signing him up to a professional Prem team, there is only one reason alone. That isn't what Bristol Bears are doing. That's the point we're trying to make here.
No, look, this isn't unusual.
No.
Johnny Wilkinson got a lot of contracts for being a brilliant rugby player and being incredibly successful and diligent professional. But it also didn't help that Johnny Wilkinson was incredibly handsome and is incredibly handsome.
Yeah.
It's just, it didn't hurt David Beckham in football.
No, it doesn't hurt, does it? It really doesn't hurt, from what I've been told.
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't know, but I know in theory, if you're good looking, people will pay you more. And look, marketability has always had a hand in sporting contracts. It certainly has in serious professional environments.
Well, in business decision making, your ability to market something you're doing is going to be more favourable than something you can't.
Yeah, but marketability in sport does come. A big portion of it comes from your ability on the pitch. I can't think off the top of my head.
You can't think of a really handsome bad rugby player,
or even general sports star. Who's the global sporting icon who isn't also brilliant in their sport? You could go for you got let's say Atani, the Japanese baseball player in MLB. I think he's now considered the best paid sporting star in the world. Now, I mean, I'm not a baseball expert, but I know just from a cursory bit of research that he's brilliant, and he's brilliant both sides of the ball. That's why he's being paid big bucks. The fact that he's incredibly marketable and incredibly popular, not only in the US but in Japan, is very helpful. But he happens to be brilliant at the sport. Yeah. Marketable comes down to a lot of different things. But David Gandy could be the most. I mean, this is so how far out of it I am. That's the only male model I can think of as a man who was a famous model 20 years ago. But no one's paying him $500,000 a year to be a rugby player because he'd be rubbish.
Yeah, exactly. So
these guys are brilliant at their sport as well, but the marketability is all part of it, and players are going to have to be comfortable with it. We talked about it a few weeks ago. Some of this is going to get uncomfortable. Eddie Hearn being involved in the sport is going to create some uncomfortable conversations like this.
Yeah, he's promised that he's going to be putting Henry Pollock in so many places we're going to start getting bored of him, and I've seen lots of fans saying that they already are bored of him, but probably for other reasons. So yeah, I think you're fair to say, yes, his words were probably poorly chosen, probably taken out of context. I know there's a lot of Bristol fans who are furious with it because it did kind of a little bit diminish their role in their local community club that they feel very in tune with. But you have to. There's also the reality of that all these clubs they are business operations. And in order
actually talking at something called the business of sport.
Yeah.
So what do you want him talking about? What do you want him talking about? Pat Lamb's tactical.
Wouldn't mind it.
But it's not relevant in the business of sport in that context, is it? Of course, it's going to talk about the business side. Just grow up. Everyone needs to grow up.
Everyone grow up. That's the headline, people. Everyone grow up. So yeah, maybe the uproar is a bit unnecessary. I can get why people would be annoyed with some of the chosen words. But you have to remember where he was speaking, what his target audience was, and actually what he was saying wasn't all that wrong. So on that hand, when you put all that together, good work.
Yeah. Do you know what it sounds like? It sounds like a CEO who's thinking innovatively in a way to drive revenue and increase fandom. I mean, if you're a Bristol Bears fan, you should actually be quite pleased that you've got someone in charge who is trying to think a little bit outside the box.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't necessarily like exactly the way he's thinking about it, But
Yeah.
the CEO's job is not to pick the team at the weekend, but it is his job to try and drive revenue in a club that, let's be honest, loses quite a lot of money.
Yeah. Well put. Well put, Rory. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I don't know whether this is like sports media looking for an opportunity to take a dig, or fans taking an opportunity to make a dig at their club. I don't know. It may become a bit of a running theme in this episode, Rory, but it feels like there is a bit of there's a difference going on. There's a difference going on between what's being said, what's being done, who's doing what. We'll touch on it. We'll touch on it.
There's a bit of a schism in the sport at the moment where, I don't know, there's a bit of people wanting to have their cake and eat it too a little bit here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can't want rugby to succeed and grow and make money and, you know, grow around the world and but not also accept that marketing is a big part of that. You know, I think you're referring a little bit to Andy Good's spat with Squidge Rugby recently. Now, whatever you think about Squidge Rugby, you know, I don't know the bloke. I've watched some of his videos. I think some of his analysis is pretty good. But Andy Good using his platform to be fairly derogatory about Squidge Rugby, being in his mum's basement or whatever, is a bit rich coming from a bloke who's been driving most of his revenue post-game by hosting a podcast about rugby every week.
Yeah, which, hasten to add, has fewer subscribers on YouTube than Squidge Rugby does.
I mean, you know...
Makes you wonder. And it's that whole kind of gatekeeping the sport to those who've played it. And there's that sort of attitude. It almost stems back to like some of the stuff we spoke in the past, where very traditional, not wanting to change the ways. And I think players can be just as guilty of this as grassroots club chairmen or things like that. It's that they don't want to lose what they believe the sport is to them, to what the direction the sport is moving in, which is a more digital sport, a more marketable sport, and a sport that is trying to move with the age, with this new era. So when you've got people like Squidge Rugby, who is incredibly popular on these new digital formats and is well respected by lots of fans for the way he delivers that information, directly conflicting with an ex-player who, let's face it, has got his job because he's an ex-player and he's being paid for his views. Yeah. Squidge Rugby is being paid because of his views. That's the difference. So I think lots of ex-players, lots of people need to get, well, they don't need to. They can keep digging their heels in if they want to. But have to have a realization that if we all were on the same ship of wanting the sport to grow and get better, you need to adapt to the way the sport's going, which is it's inevitably going to go this way. Because if it doesn't, it will disappear. Because if rugby doesn't get on board with the way the world's moving, it's going to fall behind.
Yeah, and you know, cards on the table. Obviously, we've got a vested interest in the new media views on rugby. You know,
well, and we've got a vested interest in being commentators of the sports who aren't actually ex-pro players. So naturally, we're going to fall on the side of Squidge on this one. But I think
Andy Good wants to call us losers. He's more than welcome to. But at the same time, that doesn't make him immune from criticism for being quite a negative commentator quite a lot of the time.
Well, it is interesting. So I think Tim Cocker, Egg Chasers, also called out how negative the commentary was. And these are people who may not have laced our boots in the Prem, but we're also not idiots. And we also know we're your target audience, Andy Good. Yeah. We're the ones absorbing your commentary.
We're consumers of the sport first and foremost, really, aren't we?
Yeah. And if we're sat here telling you that you are being overly negative, maybe take the feedback on board and have a think about how you react to receiving that feedback. Because ultimately, so obviously this is the segue into the Champions Cup segment of the conversation, if you hadn't twigged. I'll start off with, I thought, Bath-Bordeaux game, there's lots we'll have to unpack here, but the headline for me, outside of the match itself, I genuinely did think the commentary from Good and Delalio really detracted from the occasion, from people watching on Premier Sports, because it was overly negative. They got absolutely stuck in the weeds about they just got absolutely stuck on this issue about the TV director not getting replays, Bath being kind of harshly dealt with by the referees and TMOs and all that sort of stuff, and they spent every opportunity they could to make a dig at that. It really detracts from what a commentator's job is to do, which is to bring the viewer along, explain.
They somehow missed the fact that a brilliant game of rugby was going on.
Well, exactly. And all the conversation post this game has not been about the game. It's been about a load of stuff, which is a load of rubbish, really detracts from the game. And it's and it's been driven by the commentators on a big part of it. So yeah,
look, should we just address it? Okay. There's been a conspiracy about French TV directors ever since I can remember. Ever since I've watched European rugby, I've heard the same odd things about French TV directors. I don't know if there's some kind of unwritten rule amongst French TV directors to make sure that the TMOs don't see the damning angles when if a French player does something. Maybe it is. Maybe it is that malicious or whatever. But I think the fact that this is the issue that's come out of a game, when what I want to talk about is how good Bordeaux are.
Yeah.
I want to talk about
how bad Bath were.
Well, not even necessarily how bad Bath were on the whole, but they were
profligate and inaccurate.
Profligate is the word for it, and the fact that actually, if they were as ruthless in this game as they've been in most of their Prem games over the last 18 months or so, they probably could have won this.
Yeah, because Bordeaux weren't at their best, I'd say as well. They were excellent. But they weren't their flying best. On the French TV director, I have done a little bit of research, done a bit of reading.
Yeah.
It seems to me this boils down, surprise, surprise, to the EPCR not throwing money at this competition and having a budget TMO system. So the way the system is in the EPCR is... Yeah, I know.
Surprise.
Yeah. So so there's 3 tiers. I won't go into detail because other podcasts will touch, but there's 3 tiers of TMO. Prem and URC's at tier 2. World Cup, Six Nations is like tier 1, and for some reason, Champions Cup, the elite European format's at tier 3, and it's a very basic TV replay system where the French TV feed has someone watching it and then also watching it on a 5-second delayed feed, and they need to use that feed to try and pick out where the replays that get fed to the TMO is. So the problem is that system is not advanced enough for them to be able to go and pick out all those numbers in real time and get it to the TMO.
Which is mental.
This
is meant to be the pinnacle of the club game,
ludicrous.
And they're using a budget system that.
Yeah.
I mean,
so it's not a deliberate thing that the French TV director is trying to do. It's because the tools they've got to their disposal are not adequate for the competition and the needs of the TMO and the referee. So everyone who's pointing the finger at the TMO, everyone who's pointing the finger at the French TV director, it's not them, it's the EPCR for not thinking that they should spend a bit of money to get a system in place for what is the elite European contest. To have a TMO, like Hawkeye in the World Cup is used. They're brought in to make sure it is the best of the best. Do something similar. It's absolutely ludicrous that is what's happened. And it's caused this. And that's why there is this long-running thing about French rugby doing this. Just because that's the system they've been using all this time. And
it's another detractor to what used to be such a great competition. I have Premier Sports on the app on my phone, so I have to watch it on that or cast it to a telly.
Yeah.
And this is not a woe is me, I don't have all the media on my TV. What I would tell you is the phone app for Premier Sports is useless. And the experience of watching these games has been, frankly, dismal.
So I've not been impressed with Premier Sports at all, ever since they got the contract. It says a lot that EPCR went for them right over, TNT or whoever it is, Discovery, whoever it is at the moment.
Max nowadays.
HBO Max, yeah, because apparently Premier Sports offered a budget contract, which meant it cost them less money in some sense. Quelle surprise. But I've not been impressed with Premier Sports at all. They just buy in the French TV feed, so they have no control over a lot of it. But I think the commentary team, I thought, even like someone who's like really slick, normally like Martin Bayfield, it just felt really clunky. The entire presentation, everything just didn't feel like a flow. I don't know what was going on.
Yeah, Carl's on the table. I don't really tend to watch much of the build-up. I don't tend to watch much of the halftime stuff, just because it doesn't really do anything for me most of the time. But I did catch a bit of this one. And I was listening to Bayfield, and I like him a lot. Yeah. Generally speaking, I think he's a really good TV presenter. Yeah. I think he's usually really good. And I was listening, going, what on earth is he on about? It's like, is he reading a book? Or has he got that thing, when someone talks in your ear that happened to Haskell a few years ago? Someone's talking to you, like jams your speech. It's like it sounded like that.
I get the general impression that that's what's going on at Premier Sports, is that they've got probably too many voices in their ears telling them to do stuff. But it's even like technical stuff. Like there was a bit where Claire Thomas, who does like commentary and a bit of pitch side stuff, she was interviewing the Bordeaux attack or defence coach. I can't remember his name, an Irish chap who's their defence or attack coach. And instead of having the camera squared on him so the background's the usual spiel about sponsors and stuff, you could see all the people stood to the side in their bibs doing some paperwork and doing all the technical stuff on all the wires. They couldn't even be bothered to centre the camera frame on the person they're interviewing. And it's just
rubbish.
It's so amateurish. And then the commentary team in this particular game followed suit, because it was an amateurish performance from the commentators as far as I'm concerned. Miles Harrison did a good job, but Lawrence Dedelia hadn't, and then saying, Bordeaux must have knocked it off. It was when a Bordeaux player slapped it back, and it's just because of the camera angle being on the other side of the pitch. He was like, Bordeaux knocked it on. I was like, how? Like, is he? I don't think he watches the game. He can't be watching the game.
I just don't think he's very good.
And yeah, he's just.
I mean, let's be honest. At some point, it's been over 20 years now. We can stop hiring England World Cup winners for things.
Well, it also begs the question, like, as Andy Good has pointed out, he used to play in this game, and that's why he's so qualified to talk about it. The game has moved and changed a lot since he played. Maybe we're just as qualified to talk about this game now than him and Lawrence Dedelia are, because how in touch with it can they possibly be now?
Look, there's a lot of really good people. There's a lot of people I like who do this stuff. You know, I think Sam Warburton's brilliant. I think Jamie Roberts is very good. I like Dave Flatman. You know, I like Ugo. I think Ugo's good. You know, there's people who dropped in. I think Danny Kerr's doing pretty well. He's still very early on into his career. I think he's doing some good stuff. Chris Ashton, I quite like.
Yeah.
I think Topsy's got something about him as well. But, you know, these blokes who haven't played for 15, 20 years now. I mean, it's just time to put... I mean, it's like when in the World Cup in the ITV and you look at the lineup and it's Clive Woodward, Lawrence Delalio and Johnny Wilkinson, and you're going, oh, God. Johnny's going to talk about
the art of the kicking.
The mushroom experience he had while he was thinking about kicking. Clive Woodward's going to repeat a Daily Mail article he wrote 25 years ago. And Lawrence is, he's not going to be able to tell most of the players apart.
No, just stare at his shoelaces. Yeah, it's a weird one. And I just feel like, is this another bit that shows that there is a disconnect between where the sport needs to be going and where the sport is still a bit stuck in the trenches and not necessarily moving with the times as it should be? Perhaps a refresh.
Look, you know, Premier Sport, we talked about this before. Have people at the grounds.
Yeah.
Have a studio at the grounds. Like, these stadiums all have studios you can go into. Just go there.
Well, they were at the ground, but they were on the pitch getting soaked by the rain, which is quite amusing at times.
Yeah, that's true. But, you know, all the cameras aren't good enough. The apps aren't good enough. The analysis isn't good enough. But it just attracts from it as a...
It really does. So let's do our best, Rory, to try and give that game a little bit of analysis, because ultimately there's some really, really fantastic stuff that is worth drawing upon, rather than talking about just the negative stuff, because there is still plenty to go through.
Let's talk about it. And shall we start with Bordeaux?
Yes.
Because I think you're right, they weren't at their absolute scintillating best in the sense of...
In attack, I don't think they were. In defence, they were
monstrous. But I will say, in attack, having Luco and Jalibert continues to be a complete cheat code, doesn't it?
It really does feel like it.
Some of the little snipes that Jalibert was making, like when he starts sniping around the rucks, and you're going, "Oh my God, they could do it all. Everyone could do everything." It's not fair.
Yeah. Like I think Jalibert is probably the player over the last 18 months who, for me, has like grown so much in terms of his profile and just being able to see what he's able to do. Because he's kind of been cast away in France for a while and kind of been like perceived as like the naughty kid on the naughty step. Well,
he fell out with Gautier, didn't he? And then and obviously Entermac was the number one choice at fly half for France. And obviously, you know, I don't watch lots of top 14. I watch bits and pieces, but I don't watch loads of top 14. So the European Cup is where I get the opportunity to watch a lot of these players, not in France, in France kit. And I mean, he has rocketed up Raw's French rugby playing crushes.
The Rolodex of romance.
Oh, the thing is that the fact that he doesn't have a weakness in his game is just he doesn't have a weakness in his game, but he's also got he's got that absolute sort of bravery of when to go. I think it was in the second half. They were ahead and they turned the ball over in their own 22. And every other conventional rugby team just goes hoof it up the field.
Yeah.
But they went, no, we're playing. We can see it. And he just goes, and it's only a half break. I think in the end they do end up kicking it away. But it's just the bravery to go, I can see a gap. I'm going for this. Even though we're, maybe a score and a half up in our own 22 in a European semi-final. It's your absolute bravery of action. And then to have sort of Luku inside him, just this kind of metronomic, again, no weaknesses to his game. I mean, he doesn't have Dupont's absolute flair, but there's nothing he can't do. He can jackal, he can tackle, he can hand you off, he can kick off both feet, he can kick off the tee. He's got a running game. I don't know. We just don't produce players of this kind of quality, I think, in England on the same consistent basis that they're doing at the moment. And those two are just they're the difference makers. Up against Ben Spencer and Finn Russell, they were absolutely the difference makers.
For sure. I think every time we talk about a Bordeaux game, we wax lyrical about Luku and Jalibert, quite rightly. They're just incredible players, and I think Luku, particularly unfortunate that he's come along at the same time as Dupont, because I think Luku would be probably the one we're talking about as being one of the best scrum halves in the world, but for some reason he's always overlooked by his Toulousian counterpart. But there's a number of other performances, like Bordeaux. I think their defensive game this season has been a real standout for me compared to last year. Last year, it was very much like, we'll score more than you. You may score lots against us, but you'll score more. I think we've seen this year that they've added to their repertoire this ability to really dig in and just be one of the toughest nuts to crack defensively, and it's so impressive. And I think it's probably embodied most by Cameron Waukee, who is just absolutely
he covers so much ground. Covers so much ground. I think it was really, you're absolutely right. Their defence was incredibly impressive. It really epitomised it. I think it was 73 minutes. It was after Big Ben scores his try under the sticks. So at that point, I think it's 31-19. 10 minutes or so to go, a little under 10 minutes. It's a 2-score game. And Bath are on the attack in the red zone in the 22. And Bath get a line out, maul it, and then go into their pick and go game.
Yeah.
And, I know that you have your opinions on the Bath style of play, but
Finn Russell was on the pitch, obviously. That's how they're playing.
Yeah. But there is no doubt that when Bath get into that zone and start playing that, they are hard to stop.
Oh, yeah. That's why they're so successful.
And this is approaching 75 minutes into the game. It's absolutely white hot heat of of a semi-final. Everything's on the line. If Bath score now, it's on.
Yeah.
And they stop the line out maul. They stop the pick and goes, and they turn the ball over. 10 metres off the try line, 75 minutes into the match, when Bath had brought on, Ted Hill, Sam Underhill, Miles Reed, Epitupolotu, Van Veek. It's
the exact thing Bath been doing all season that every club up until now has not been able to stop in any way.
No one's been able to stop it, but Bordeaux absolutely stopped it at source, and it's their pack. In some ways, the pack is, from just names wise, is quite unglamorous.
Yeah. I'd agree.
There's no out and out superstar. I mean, there's players that we like. We love Big Ben Tamafuna.
Oh yeah,
but he's not a superstar of the game in the same way that Jalibert
should be.
He should be, and by rights, Carlo Sardi should be just for his legs. Just those lovely thighs.
Yeah.
But they're not. It's not really a superstar pack in that sense. But Waukee was pretty. Gazzotti
was monstrous.
He was monstrous. His power to finish that first try was phenomenal. Parlu, I think is a player I'm rapidly loving. Every time I've watched him this season, he's just an absolute handful with ball in hand.
Yeah, and then Mathieu, who's just got his first French cap in the Six Nations this year. He's some player as well, and he's pretty.
Yeah, and obviously he scores the try, which finishes it off. Penaud makes again. That's another example. They were this is after the turnover we just talked about. They win the penalty. They go out the pitch. They win the line out. And you're in the Bath half. You've got 5 minutes to go in the game.
Yeah.
What do you do? Well, you
kill
maul
the
it,
clock. We kill the clock.
and you
obviously.
kill the clock. No, you don't. You play off the line out. You offload it 5 times. You get it to Penno on the left wing, who throws a one-handed offload inside that gets batted down by a Bath player, and Mattia goes and runs it under the sticks. Because if you're Bordeaux, you can do that, and you'll score a try. Every other team in the world kills that game.
Yeah.
But no, Bordeaux just see Penno's free on the left. We're playing. Offload it. Jouer.
I think that is why. And everything, like, I'm a Northampton Saints fan. I should absolutely detest Bordeaux after last year's final. Some of the fireworks with off-pitch stuff and all that sort of stuff. I absolutely love watching Bordeaux.
I love them.
And it's because of that. That's why I'm donning a Bordeaux kit today. Another great visual aspect for this audio-visual format. It's really to be applauded. And I think the way they have merged together that mercurial run from anywhere ability with probably what is the strongest defensive game as well is why they are so tough to beat, as Toulouse found out in the last round and as Bath found out this week. And we probably should touch on a bit of Bath's performance. They bottled it. They bottled it. We've seen there's like 56% tackle success rate. You ain't winning nothing. It doesn't matter how many calls you think you got wrong from the ref. You're not winning nothing with a 56% tackle success rate.
Well, I think their handling was their biggest problem. I mean, they talked about it a bit on commentary, but things like, how they presented the ball off the top of the line out. I mean, the line out fell apart at some point.
76% line out success. Like, that's poor.
It's just not good enough at that level. At that point of a competition, it's not good enough. And their line out's actually been surprisingly fallible.
Well, you said the other week that they've actually got the worst line out in the Prem, haven't they? I didn't realise that.
So they said on commentary one week, which I found hard to believe. But actually, if you think back on it, the line out hasn't been that good, which is strange when you think Tom Dunn's a very good line out thrower. They've got plenty of good jumpers in that. Quinn Roon, Charlie Riels, and Josh Bayliss and Guy Pepper can all jump very comfortably.
Yeah, and
I don't know, they just seem to be sloppy in there. But lots of players are quite sloppy.
Considering it's something that is such a source of one of their biggest weapons, I'm so surprised it's allowed to be so sloppy by Van Gran. To me, surely he's drilling that week in, week out to get that as precise as possible.
It's such a big weapon for them. But but they were sloppy. I mean, there was a Finn Russell knock on at one point. It was just really casual.
Yeah.
In the midfield, Santi Carreras knocked it on when he shouldn't have. Arundel knocked it on a couple of times when, and don't get me wrong, he had a tough battle in the air, but he didn't secure a few balls that he probably should have. They were sloppy, I thought. I mean, there's a good. I mean, Hennessy, I thought was very good. His try,
he's one to watch, I think. Sadly, from a Wales perspective, but he's got something about him that's worth keeping an eye on.
Yeah,
I also thought
he's got something from a mentality. I mean, the way that he celebrated his try made me think, you've got a bit of grit.
Bit of an edge. It reminded me, because we've not had a lot of him this season. Will Muir is so good.
Great. Some of the takes he had. There was one he took under real pressure.
Bit of acrobats in the air.
Yeah, he took an absolute double top as well. Yeah. Superb. I mean, the horse.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it looks like he's done in some sort of dislocation, wasn't it? Of some sort.
Yeah, it looked painful.
So that didn't look good for him for the rest of the season, which obviously is not ideal, because I think with him on the wing, Bath do seem a lot more dangerous in the air than it was when Thocker the Singer and Arundel. With Muir, it's a different threat, I feel. Do we talk about Alfie Barbary's 3 potential high tackles? We probably should touch on it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, look, there were. There are 3 high shots in that game that at least one of them should have been called, and Bath were unfortunate. But to be fair, Van Graan's called that out. Mm-hmm. But if you read everything he said, he was actually very conciliatory about the fact that
I'm not
Bordeaux were the better side on this. He's not complaining about that for the win.
Yeah.
I actually thought Barbary, generally speaking, had a pretty good game. I know he came off for Marsbury. I thought he carried really well. I think he made a really good account for himself in up against a defence that was not given a lot of change. Mm. I thought he just kept running into those brick walls, and fair play to him on that. But there were 2 or 3 high shots that weren't that weren't called out. But
it's like I said last week with Opoku Gyamfi, where he got called out for a high hit against Saints. You're gonna get like 9 or 10 of those style of high hits in every single game because of the way players of those size run into players now. They kind of know that they're kind of putting their head first, and I think some refs, I think Nika Mushfagaveli, whose name I always forget how to pronounce, some referees look at it that way and they say, "Oh, for me, it's chest on chest." They call it live. We spoke about the TMO situation. They're not going to get a replay quick enough, so they're not really going to act on it. Yes, in hindsight, it looks like a high tackle. It looks like it should be a pen, maybe a yellow card for 1 or 2. Not helped by Santi Carreras faking being hit in the head, so maybe you shouldn't cry wolf. Maybe a lesson learnt there. Because that was blatant, and the TV director picked up on that. But like those 3 hits had no bearing on Bath's performance. Bath's performance was of their own doing, and the level they needed to hit was of their own making, and not being
masters their own downfall in this one. So, I don't think they can have any real complaints.
No, well, and if they were complaining, well, join the club of English sides who've been undone by refereeing decisions that have not gone in their favour, because sometimes you win some, sometimes you lose some, Bath fans. You won some last time, you lost some this time. Not bitter at all.
Yeah, very, very magnanimous, David.
As I just move out of the way so you can see my signed Saints jersey behind my head. But, it's like, from a perspective of a very neutral in this game, you can't complain about a refereeing performance not going in your favour when in the round before you've had a couple of favourable decisions go your way. It happens in the sport. You just have to roll with it. The way the laws are written, there's interpretation. Things are going to go in certain ways that you don't like. You have to accept it.
If you're going to, talk about Santi Carreras knocking over the try line early on, and the fact that Russell threw a terrible pass that went too high as well. Talk about the line-out ball that you didn't present well enough. Talk about, passes thrown at Barbari's ankles.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I don't think they can.
Well,
I don't think they can actually have any.
Talk about missing 44% of your tackles.
Exactly. And look, don't be wrong. It must be really hard to tackle a lot of these players, but ultimately, if you're going to get to a final, you're going to have to.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. And Bordeaux were just silky smooth, and they rode it, and they were good for the win. In the other semi-final, because obviously we shouldn't just talk Bordeaux versus Bath. Obviously, there was another game at this round.
There certainly was.
Probably a bit less controversial of a game, but Leinster up against Toulon. Obviously, we still had Leo Cullen coming out firing, so there's a little bit of controversy around this game in some sense. But
Leo Cullen moaning about the media being so against Leinster. Everyone's always against poor old Leinster, who had yet another home semi-final in a neutral ground, which is the ground they always play in. So, poor old Leinster.
Just because we lost last year, why are you being so mean to us? I don't buy it. I think Leinster, you're looked after quite nicely. I wouldn't worry too much. And, you did win this game, so maybe be happy about it. Even though I don't feel like Leinster have been that impressive this year, they've done that thing where they just keep winning regardless.
Well, I tell you where they were very impressive in this game is they blitzed Toulon out of it for for 70 minutes, effectively.
Yeah.
Toulon just could not get round them. Tuasuvu's try in the first half aside, which is basically the only time Toulon were able to string together consistent, effective phases for most of the game. Jaminet finding him on the edge with a really nice pass. The rest of it, Toulon just suffocated them in defence. They got away with it a bit in this game because Harry Byrne had a poor game, kicked badly. I mean, missed 2 in front of the posts.
Yeah.
No, 1 in front of the post. 1 was when he was binned off as well. Missed touch off penalties. I mean, just seemed to struggle with the occasion at times. But, their big players stepped up. Conan powers over, Van der Fleer powers over, Ringrose, Doris. When these are the names that are scoring, and it's Leinster, it's always these names, obviously. But they were the players that really stood up and were counted in this one. Andrew Porter had his best game probably all season. I know he's been injured a lot. And, Toulon, I think Toulon will be disappointed that they didn't get on top in the scrum. They really got on the wrong side of the referee early on in that against a Leinster scrum that's not been entirely infallible this season, I think.
No.
They'll also just be disappointed that their handling let them down. Under pressure from Leinster, but it was. I think Toulon will feel like this was a missed opportunity because it's not an unbeatable Leinster side this season.
No.
But they still have that something about them that makes them hard to beat, and Bordeaux will not be able to take them lightly.
No.
Even if they're not maybe the Leinster team of...
No, so I think what we saw in this
10 years
game
ago.
is basically what we'll probably see from Leinster in the final, is that they put every effort into suffocating Toulon in having any form of quick ball, any form of multiple phases. Like their defensive line speed just absolutely suffocated Toulon in the centres. Yeah. And you like
Will they be able to do that again?
Well, it's a much harder assignment, but if you can stop things at source, like granted, Luku and Jalibert are a very different proposition to Sinzel and forgive me, who else was there? Obviously, just different levels. But just Toulon just didn't seem to be able to create anything for a large part of the game, and it's just because of the Leinster defence. It wasn't anything clever. It wasn't anything fancy. It wasn't anything showy. But Leinster showed how you can really get to a team and stop them from doing anything. And when you get on top of a team like that, you then start getting opportunities yourself because panic sets in. That feel when things aren't working, especially a team like Toulon, if it's not working, that's when they start imploding a little bit. And Leinster are able, when they had their opportunities, to really strong arm their over and then put scoreboard pressure on, and then that just adds to it.
I also think if I was Toulon, and I really like Ben White, I think he's a really good scrum half, but they looked infinitely better when Serran came on. And obviously, 2 of their 3 tries came from Serran being on the pitch, one of which he scores, the other which he effectively assists with an offload. He assists this as he offloads off to Albanos, who kicks a lovely off crossfield over to Dreyan. Prendergast making a classically poor attempt at tackling, which is why he wasn't starting.
Yeah, as a reason why he's been delegated to the 22 shirt.
And Toulon nearly won it. Let's be frank. Jaminet right at the end breaks. Dreyan really gets it away, and if Ioane does really well to catch him, but if that offload goes to Tuasuvu,
true.
Toulon are in the final.
Yeah, true. And then who was it? Was it Albanos got pinged, and when Toulon needed to get something to go their way to get the ball back, and it just kind of gifted Leinster the opportunity to do what Bordeaux should have done and just play the game out and not do anything flashy. Leinster done what Leinster do. They won. They didn't win necessarily pretty, but they won effectively and sets up Bordeaux-Leinster final. I'm still trying to decide whether I'm excited by that prospect or not.
I'll be very excited if Bordeaux win it handsomely.
Which could well happen, because I also don't think Leinster have been exposed to a tough... I think they got quite a lucky draw this year, I think it's fair to say. I don't think... No one was expecting Toulouse and Bordeaux to be in the same half of the knockout table, for instance.
No, that's true.
So I think Leinster had a relatively comfortable run-in, let's say. And I don't think they've been challenged the way Bordeaux will challenge them. So I think it could well...
I also just think out and out, Bordeaux are just the best team. I just think
it's as simple as
the
that.
The long and short of it is I just think Bordeaux are the best team in Europe.
Yeah.
And after the last couple of weeks of European competition, I don't think it's that close.
No, it's hard to think of another European team who's anywhere near them, really, if I'm honest.
Toulouse at their best, but other than that...
But they beat Toulouse.
They beat Toulouse quite comfortably in the end. So ultimately, I just think it's Bordeaux and then everyone else, isn't it? Yeah,
the only weird thing is that they lost to Montpellier in the top 14 a week before. At home. Figure that out.
Top 14 is a weird league. It's a weird old league.
So, I think they've lost 7 times this season. It's a weird old league. But
yeah,
I think maybe that just shows that they're really focused on going back-to-back in the Champions Cup more so than anything else, which probably is what's going on here. So that sets up Champions Cup final in Bilbao between Bordeaux and Leinster. So, strap in, folks. That should be a good game. Do we do a slight nod to the Challenge Cup, Rory? Do we give that competition a little bit of airtime? We don't normally do, but
Well, I think we should just mention that in the final will be Ulster against Montpellier. Montpellier squeaking past the Dragons 18-12. and Ulster relatively comfortable against Exeter Chiefs 29-12. Disappointing for the Chiefs, but
I feel like injuries and I think maybe their season's not petering out, but I think what we've seen from so far this season, maybe we're starting to see that its momentum slowing down a little bit. And I don't know, it just feels like had this game been played 2 months ago, it could have been a different story.
They're not quite as infallible as they were a couple of months ago, but I think they'll be disappointed not to be. I know Ulster, I think, are a much improved side this year. I think they're much more competitive in the URC.
Yeah.
I know there's some controversy around Feo Boso not being allowed to play again with a high shot that wasn't deemed to be high danger. From what I can tell, I think it's another sort of storm and sea cup, but it's an interesting talking point for Baxter, I suppose, to kind of slightly detract from having lost this game.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Interesting how they manage, because I think in the back three, he's probably a bit annoyed because back three, I think they're really down to bare bones because they haven't got a fullback. I think Brown Bampo's injured. Feo Boso's probably going to have to do some return to play protocol stuff. They're going to be really relying on Campbell Riddle to do a hell of a lot.
Maybe they shouldn't have let Josh Hodge go.
Well, there's a thought for you. They'll just be focused on the Prem now, securing that top 4 spot. So that's the Challenge Cup, Ulster versus Montpellier, and unfortunately we were stolen from the fans' favourite pick of the Dragons getting to a Challenge Cup final. Imagine that happens from the start of the season from Welsh
Newport
Rugby.
would have been out in Spain.
It would have been rocking, but not to be this year. But fair play to the Dragons getting to the semi-final stages. Right, Rory, I think we've covered European competition well enough there.
Yes.
It feels like we've discussed the civil war going on in rugby at the moment quite well. But, Schisms. But, there's a time now where we can focus on moving forwards. And that's exactly what the RFU have done, Rory, because they've done an assessment of Steve Borthwick's tenure, his performance, grasping a powerful 5th place out of 6 in this year's Six Nation. And they've said he's the man for the job, Rory.
Do you mean a report entitled Project Nothing to See Here?
The very same. It's almost like they've chosen the week where there's been so much going on in the rugby world news that this is the week to drop that news. Interesting idea, that.
We've searched high and low. We've left no stone unturned, and we've decided everything's fine. Just carry on as we are.
Yeah, nothing to see here, as you said. So we're going to help out. We're going to do our bit, Rory, because Steve Borthwick's got a lot on his plate. Apparently, there's a lot of commitments and agreements as part of this where he's going to make changes. He's going to change things up in order to address the things that went wrong. Perfect. Great. Love to hear that. What we're going to do for you, Mr. Borthwick, we're going to run through what an England squad should be looking like going into the summer based on the form players in the Prem to try and save you a bit of that agony about who to pick and who not to pick. Because it's the least we can do. And, there's only been a couple of games, so we had a bit of spare time to really get our heads into something else for once. So, Rory, should we go position by position? The players Borthwick needs to be considering going into the summer, and especially if we're going on this angle of that he needs to do something slightly different. How does he approach that? So let's start propping department.
Yeah, so I've gone with a 36-man squad for the summer.
Okay, fantastic. That tracks with what it should be, yeah.
Yeah, so I've got 6 props, and I've gone based on current form. This is quite weighted to current form as opposed to maybe some more established. And also, it's current form and who's currently playing, so I haven't picked anyone who's currently injured or I believe to still be injured.
Sorry, Finn Baxter.
Well, yes. So a loose head prop, I've got Ellis Genge, naturally.
Yeah.
Manny Eogan.
Glad you said that, because he's one that I think's really hit form.
Yeah, and in the absence of Finn Baxter, I think that probably means you turn to Beno Abano.
I think it's about time.
At this point,
chance.
He did. If Finn Baxter's not going to have played for months on end, I think Beno Abano deserves a shot. He's playing really well for Bath. I mean, and he's been playing well for Bath for a couple of seasons. He's really unlucky not to have got a cap. And I know from the way people talk about it, he's desperate to get a cap as well. Yeah,
I think he's probably one of the unlucky players to have not picked up more caps. He certainly got the game at the set piece to I think he's good enough at the scrum for the international level.
Yeah.
I'm just amazed you didn't canvas for Vaurapava Ruskin to finally get his chance. But
Tempting, but I think off the back of one really good game, that's probably not quite enough of Val. And with the best in the world, I love Val to pieces. I think he's been a really underrated prop in the Prem, and I think he probably should have got more recognition at international level at various points in his career, often buttressed by injuries at bad times. But 33 now, not a good injury record. It's probably not going to happen for him.
Which is a shame, because in his pomp, genuinely could have been world class, I think. But he's struck down by injuries at really bad times. So yeah, I'm happy with those loose heads. I haven't got any challenges for you there. I think maybe others may say Finn Baxter, they may say Bevan Rodd, but as you say, form, injury.
Both injured. Exactly. Both injured, I think. Neither of them are playing fantastic rugby at the moment. Well, were playing fantastic rugby before they got injured. I think those three are in much better fettle.
Agreed. Tight heads.
Joe Hayes, easy one.
Yeah, has to be there. Yeah.
Astropoku for sure. Just because, although form not great, but actually at this point you're getting quite low in the tight head stocks with Trev injured. Obviously Will Stewart's injured.
Yeah.
And the third man I'm going to take, I was tempted to say for Sogbon, but I actually think if you're going to go on form, you got to give it to Kloska.
I'm glad you said that, because I think our remit for this was to think about form. For Sogbon, we've discussed it recently. Like, scrum time, does the work. But he's only had like one game out of the last 4 where he seems to be doing more than just scrumming. Yeah. And we can't go off based off that one Gloucester's one good game, basically.
Yeah, when it actually comes to selecting it, and if you want to say, well, we want a third tie head there, but we're going to pick for Sogbon because we think he's got the highest ceiling, I think there's a logic to it. But if you're picking on form, Kloska's been well above.
I think he's one of those players, really understated, really, unsung, genuine. I also think the way he works with Ellis Genge is really positive. I think those two seem to work well together. And you just look at Kloska's work rate, it's incredible for a tired prop. And it's one of those things that is always underappreciated in forwards.
Yeah.
I would love to think that Borthwick would consider rewarding Kloska with an opportunity in the summer, because I think of all the tired props, he's the one that's probably worked the hardest for it in the league this season so far. I'm in agreement. Hooking department, interesting one, because injuries and all sorts going on in this space.
Yeah, this is not this one. I wouldn't be surprised if there was more challenge to this one, but I've gone with Jamie George, Jamie Blamire, and Nathan Jabulu.
I think
now you can make a case for Theo Dan. You can. Look, Curtis Langdon's obviously in and around coming back from injury, but he's had about 40 minutes of game time.
Yeah, and then he's got injured again, so I don't think we'll see him again for a couple of weeks.
Olgray's out for the season.
Yeah.
Obviously, Luke Kandicki's out for the season. Outside of that, I think Jabulu has to be the pick. I mean, I think Theo Dan would be the natural challenge to that. Well, I think Jabulu's.
There's one man you're forgetting. There's one man you're forgetting, Rory. Tom Dunn.
Well, yeah, Tom Dunn. Yes, that's true. I mean, Tom Dunn. I mean, and you can make the case for Kepetupolotu as well if you're going on that basis. I think Tom Dunn, a great servant to Bath. He's got his cap and he's well deserved. He probably deserved to get more recognition at international level across his career. I just think he's just not quite mobile enough for the game that I think England need to play.
Well, then Tuipulotu definitely comes into the equation, then, doesn't he?
Well, Tuipulotu absolutely does come into the equation.
And I think form-wise, Tuipulotu fits in as well, because I think his form's better than Theo Dan's, for example. And his disciplinary record's better than Jabulu's.
That's a fair challenge, and I think Jabulu on this list is probably the one that I was least certain of. But I thought up until the ban, I thought he was playing really well. I thought he was on a really good trajectory. I think he's got all the bits that you're going to need to be a good international hooker. So I just think he just sneaks it in for me. I think Theo Dan's set piece isn't good enough, particularly his line out. I think Kepa Tuipulotu will be there, but I think maybe it's a summer too early.
Yeah. Part of me wonders with Tuipulotu. I think I'll be more surprised to see Jabulu there than with Tuipulotu, because I just have a feeling Tuipulotu is one of those players that England are likely to kind of fast track in the same way they kind of did with Pollock.
I could see him in there against Fiji.
Yeah. So I think, although I agree with what you're saying about Jabulu, like disciplinary record to one side, we've said already on this podcast that we really rate and think he's got the all-round game. I just got this feeling that the RFU are kind of putting their eggs in the Tuipulotu basket already, because they've been really behind him for some time, and there's been a lot of noise.
I could absolutely see him in there. I could see him there, but Bulu would get my nod. But if you bring Tuipulotu in, I'm not going to throw my toys at the pram.
Yeah, because Jamie George is he's going to be the starter. Let's face it. So you can kind of afford to have a youngster in Tuipulotu mould there to kind of be the third choice there. So I'm not. Yeah, that's the front row sorted. Locks, Rory. I will say before you say, Alex Coles is back on the training pitch.
Yeah, no, Alex Coles is in there. So I've got Maratoje, Chesham,
yeah,
Alex Coles, and then I thought, do I fast track George Martin back in? I thought, no.
Ask us again in a few weeks' time.
Yeah, ask me again in 3 weeks' time, and he's probably in there. So the fourth slot, I am going to give it to Arthur Clarke, because I think in a poor season from Gloucester, he's been pretty consistent. He's been pretty good in the last few weeks, very good last week. And I think he's got the raw ingredients that I think would be of interest to Borthwick. He's 6 foot a million. He's big, he's heavy, he's got much better hands than you'd expect for a man his size. Hits rucks, hits mauls, makes his tackles. Yeah, I think there's something in there. And
I really like Arthur.
But George Martin is still fit by the summer, and you take him. I'm got no qualms with it.
I think again maybe bias, which I'm occasionally guilty of. Tom Lockett
considered, and was definitely in the conversation with that. And he has played quite a bit recently. I don't know if he's played enough across this season for me, or maybe it's just he's been overshadowed by VDM.
He casts a mighty big shadow, Rory.
He does cast a mighty big shadow. But I do like Lockett. If he was in there, I wouldn't be upset.
And how about this curveball? If Borthwick really wanted to really test the waters of youngsters, Elliot Williams.
Well,
he's got the size for it.
He's absolutely got the size for it, and I think he's got the talent for it. The fact that he's 18 is just baffling to me. Wouldn't hate it as a call. I suspect they'll want him to go with the under-20s.
Yeah, because South Africa are looking scary again this year in the under-20s.
Yeah, they look huge. But he's definitely one to watch. You could absolutely see that he's going to have England caps. I think I'd be amazed if he didn't end up with a bag full of them.
I completely agree. It's just just putting it out there as trying to help Borthwick out here. But no, I agree. Course. It's got for me personally, Itoje and Coles are you starting locks, Chesham potentially in the 6 shirt, maybe interchange Coles and Chesham. I think those three are nailed on. Martin, I personally am on the fence with Martin because he's been out for so long. I know how good he can be when he's fit, but we need to see that in a Leicester shirt before I'm like, let's catapult him straight back in because, he's been rushed back a couple of times already and then he's disappeared for another few months. Let's see what he's like with a few games under his belt before let's say he's ready for running out against New Zealand or South Africa or whoever else we've got in the summer. Maybe against Fiji. But yeah, I'm not too against those picks. I can't think of anyone else off the top of my head who is glaringly shouting, "Pick me, pick me, pick me." Other than Ed Prowse, but that would be my bias. Back row, Rory. Easiest / hardest area because I think there's too many players for how many positions.
Yeah, you have to make some quite brutal calls. So, for example, I haven't picked Barbary. I'm leaning more towards maybe he does need to get a shot at international.
I would have Barbary there. I would.
But I'll tell you who I have picked. So if you want Barbary, then fair enough. But you tell me who to drop out.
Oh no!
I've got Sam Underhill, Guy Pepper, Ben Earl, Courtney Laws.
He's back.
Henry Pollock, Greg Fizzelau, and Chandler Cunningham-South.
Ooh.
So I'm fast-tracking Laws back in.
I love it. He's back, people.
I knew you'd love that.
Yeah. Well, I'm not dropping Laws for Barbary, that's for sure.
My
argument would be, if you've got Laws there, do we need Fizzelau, Earl, and Cunningham-South all kind of vying for the 8 shirt? And Pollock, arguably. So I'd probably drop one of those for I'll probably drop Cunningham South just because of form. He's not been in good form.
Barbary,
yeah.
Yeah.
Because we don't need.
I mean,
Because
I think that's
Cunningham-South's like he's a strong pick because he can cover second row and 6 and 8. But if you've got Courtney Laws, he covers second row and 6. We're picking a bunch of locks who can also cover 6. We don't need that flexibility from Cunningham-South now. So if we're picking him to be an 8, Barbari's been a better 8 this season than Cunningham-South has.
a shout.
And
Do you drop in Cunningham-South?
oh, and there'll be people saying Dombrandt.
I'm not saying Don Brandt.
Yeah, I'm saying people, not saying us.
You're saying Quins fans, aren't you?
Yeah, Quins fans will be saying Dombrandt.
That's been very rude because Don Brandt's actually been very good in a poor Quins side in recent weeks, but not for me. Not if I'm going to pick an out-and-out 8 in that mould, I'm picking Barbary.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's as close as we could get to Tom Willis without being able to pick Tom Willis, which unfortunately we can't pick Tom Willis. As much as we'd love to. Okay, scrum half, Rory. This one's a bit more straightforward. I'd like to think it's kind of par for the course, maybe, or are you throwing a bit of a curveball in?
Possibly a bit of a curveball. I've gone Mitchell.
Yeah.
I've gone Spencer, and I've gone McParland.
Rory, you're finally getting on board with the Saints' way of thinking. I love it.
Well, look, so Van Poorfleet obviously would have been in the conversation. I think he's played very well for Tigers. Big fan of Rafi Quirk.
Yeah.
Big fan of Lucas Friday.
Yeah.
Harry Randall's still knocking about and playing very well for Bristol.
Charlie Bracken,
I'm a big fan of, and I think he's got an international future. But if I'm thinking right now, who's been playing the best rugby at 9 in the last 4 or 5 months? It's Archie Parland.
Yeah, arguably he's had better games than Mitchell.
Yeah, and I don't think he's fallible. I don't think he starts. I don't even think he necessarily gets in the match day squad straight away. But I think he's earned a shot at the shirt.
Yeah, I really, really don't hate it, Roy. I did not think you were going to go this way. I was going to make that argument.
You were on your toes. I could see you were ready to go for me.
But because I thought you were going to, so and quite rightly, Borthwick is probably going to go Mitchell, Spencer, Van Poorfleet. But I'd love to see him throw McParland in there.
Look, all the reports are they are big fans and they are all looking at him very closely.
So they blimmin' well should be, Rory. Fly half.
Marcus Smith, George Ford.
I was going to skate away from the fact that you're not going to claim George Ford's in red hot form, are you?
No, but I also think this England squad can't afford to dispose of natural leaders when you look at everyone else who's in there at the moment, which is one of the reasons why I'm fast tracking Courtney Laws back in.
Yeah.
I know this is the form squad, but let's also be fair and say Ford was up until very recently in possession of the England shirt. And I think you probably still got to take 3 10s.
Yeah. So
you could take, but look, you can definitely make the argument for Billy Sell, 100% from a form perspective.
Yeah.
And I completely buy why you would. Charlie Atkinson has been in and around that.
What about Owen Farrell from a leadership perspective, if that's what you want?
Well, yes. There's a question around that. Has he played that well for Saracens?
In recent weeks, he's probably played better than George Ford has.
Yeah. I think this is probably the one call where I'm going to say, no, I'm still keeping George Ford there.
Oh, I agree. I'm just being a little bit devil's advocate for you.
It's a fair question. Yeah. It's an absolutely fair question, and I think others will ask it. But
and it does still. I think we are lucky. We do have some good 10s on our, like Finn Smith. Again, I do think he could genuinely be world class, and he's on the way to being world class. And George Ford has been and continues to be world class, and Marcus Smith has world class moments. I still worry a little bit about depth at the fly half position. I think we both thought the likes of Ben Cohen would get a bit more game time down at Exeter. He's not been given much of a shot. I worry about 3-4 years' time when Ford's probably not going to be around, Farrell's not going to be around. Marcus Smith will be early 30s by that stage. It's just what that next phase, because I know I've got high hopes for the likes of James Lineker. There's a couple of others who are coming through who could be really good, but I was worried that we don't seem to have that next one coming through the system at the moment who's pushing for game time in a Prem team.
Well, we've also got a lot of very strong 10s in the league, to be fair.
So what you're saying is we can get rid of Finn Russell, get Kieran Donahue playing more.
I think you'll start to see some of that. To be honest, to be completely frank with you, I think you're going to start seeing some of that change of the guard happening. There'll be spots up for grabs at the likes of possibly at Saracens, possibly at Tigers,
Yeah.
the Red Bulls.
I'm really intrigued where Red Bulls go for their 10 shirt. Really intrigued.
Yeah.
I know there's Zach Henry, who's an English qualified 10, so he arguably could come into this equation. But let's face it, he isn't.
They've not signed him as a superstar 10 forever, but they will want one at some point.
Yeah.
I think there's potentially a spot at Bears coming up because Tom Jordan, although he's 10, he's 10, 12, 13, 15.
Yeah, and AJ McGinty can only play for so long.
5. Yeah. So I think there'll be spots for young 10s coming through, but I think with those 3 is still pretty well sorted.
Okay. I'm happy with that. Centres, Rory.
Still tough.
Have recent injuries changed your approach? Obviously, Lawrence Ajomo.
Do we know how long Ajomo's out for?
No, I don't know off the top of my head, but it doesn't
I have a
sound
feeling
like
it's not too bad an injury, so I've kept Ajomo in my squad.
Okay.
I've got Dingwall, Seb Atkinson, Ollie Lawrence, and Max Ajomo.
Henry Slade may have an argument. Henry Slade might have an argument about that.
Well, Henry Slade nearly got in, and if I'd had another slot in my squad, Henry Slade would have been in there. You could probably argue Slade over Ford.
Yeah,
that might be an argument.
Yeah, I think that would be a fair argument, especially because he does offer place kicking and leadership. And
well, that's the one concession I'll make to this because I think they'll still pick George Ford, but for a form squad, we can have Henry Slade in over George Ford.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Litchfield, yeah, interesting shout. He's a name that I haven't heard being rumoured anywhere close to an England shirt, but if you actually
he's on a rapid rise.
Yeah, if you have to look at form, he's definitely been up there in terms of centres.
Will Wand, been brilliant for Tigers.
I really like Will Wand. I think he's definitely one to watch. Who else? Well, it's the autumn Van Rensburg becomes available, isn't it, not the summer?
Yeah.
So he's not in. Massey White, I think it's hard to make an argument for any Sale player to be in on the form selection.
No, I think he might end up being a bit one-dimensional.
I'll tell you, probably nowhere near the squad, but who has impressed me, and maybe one to watch 3 years' time. Reece Beekman's up at Red Bulls.
He keeps getting game time.
Which he probably won't.
Which he probably won't. But, if he does, and playing with some high-quality players around him.
Because he's a big unit, he runs hard, he's got the good hands. So he's one of those players.
I think Will Rigg up there next year.
And another one, he's another.
And Chris Harris.
Yeah. Well, we won't be seeing him again. Oh, dear. But no, I just thought, I'm trying to think of other curveballs. No, again, centres has long been in the area that I feel like England, depth-wise, we've got a lot of solid players, but we don't quite necessarily seem to have the high-quality ones. But maybe there's a few more coming through. But yeah, I think the 4/5, if we go with the Slade change, they feel like the most accurate ones. Wings Rory.
Tommy Freeman
has to be there.
Manny Feweboso,
if he remains fit.
Tom Roebuck.
Okay.
And Paul Brown-Bampo.
I do love a bit of PBB. So Roebuck.
Now, obviously, the notable missing name there is Noah Kalori.
18 tries in 9 games. Again, I guess your argument is that they'll want him for the under-20s.
Yes, at the moment. And I think we don't have to rush him in just yet.
No.
Whilst he's still developing his all-round game. But, I mean...
I think if he keeps scoring, if he keeps his try-scoring record up on the run-in for Saracens, and if that leads to them getting a top 4 spot, which I know is highly, highly unlikely, but say if he picks up another 4, 5, 6 tries, I think...
Then he could easily overtake Tom Roebuck in that.
I think if that happens, it almost makes it impossible for Borthwick to not pick him, because one, how can a player who's 19 years old break the single-season try-scoring record and then not pick them? You always become you can't not pick him in that.
You can't ignore it at that point. Yeah,
but if Saracens, there's a bit for Saracens here about whether they manage him, because they went for a bit in the middle of the season where they just stopped picking him, sent him back to Amped Hill, took him out of the limelight, and let him focus on his game. They could choose to do that again in the run into the season to protect him, like quotations for those listening. I'm doing the bunny ears. Protect him from that England selection, knowing that it could break him. Because we've seen that international rugby gone too soon can really put a player back in their development. So that's on Saracens, whether they think it's the right thing for him or not. I'd still, so maybe some other Caden Murley, perhaps.
I love Caden Murley. I think he's been really, really good for Quins in obviously Tussing. I think he's a proper leader in that team. Absolutely carries that team on its back. But I've got 4 spots, and I just think Paul Brown-Bampo's been better. I think he's got a more interesting ceiling. And I just kind of want to see. I just want to see what he could do in that environment, because I think his raw talent is almost as good as Manifo Oboso. I think he's maybe not quite Manifo Oboso, but he's like 95% of the way there, and that is still a bloody good player.
Yeah, I agree. He's got that. He's still got that similar explosiveness, but he's a bit rangier with it, and he's got a bit more of an aerial threat to his game. And I'd really
his
love
development's been so rapid.
I'd love to see a foot race between the two, because I'm not certain who the quickest would be. Because I think
difficult to know.
Because their running styles are very different as well, which is again poses different questions to the tacklers about how you tackle them, because they've both got quite awkward running styles to be tackled. Ollie Slightholm, late shout, he's started picking up a little bit of form.
Yeah, needs to pick up a bit more form for me. Okay. Ibatoy probably needs to pick up a bit more form after a long injury layoff.
Campbell Riddle,
Collins, Radwan, both would be in and around the mixer. Wing is a player is an area that we're pretty well stacked.
Yeah,
but I'm pretty comfortable with Freeman, Manifo Oboso, Tom Roebuck, Paul Brown-Bampo at the minute. Although I think Tom Roebuck is the most vulnerable of those 4 from a form perspective.
Yeah, for sure.
I still think he actually plays quite well for Sale in limited opportunity, but he's from a form perspective, he's probably the most vulnerable for me.
Yeah, no, I agree. Okay, fullback, is it quite straightforward? Furbank and Stewart?
Yeah, I if I'd had another spot, I'd have put Hendy in as well, just because I love him. Yeah. But 36 was my limit. And I think Freddie Stewart is the right player at the wrong time. I think there are. I think 2019. I think Freddie Stewart is England's fullback. Maybe even over Mike Brown. But the game has slightly moved on. The blitz defense means you need another pair of hands who can play make, which is Furbank. But at the same time, there's not actually a load of fullbacks pulling up trees from an English perspective at the moment. So you'd have to still pick him.
Yeah.
But I think Furbank is the obvious answer.
Oh, yeah, I think Furbank's obvious. The thing with Stewart is he always looks really impressive for Leicester. But whenever he pulls on an England shirt, it's never quite the same. He just looks, whether it's a confidence thing, because I know he's had a fair few hits. You also have to remember, he's 24. He's still really young.
He's young. And also, I think it's really easy to forget when you're not, we're obviously not in these environments ourselves. The step up from Prem to international is insane.
Yeah.
It is a massive, massive step up. And being a good club player doesn't translate automatically to being a good international player. Not to say that he isn't a good international player, but these things are not straightforward. It's a different sport in many ways. It's like if you're a cricket fan and you went to watch a county championship game, you would spot every week 3 or 4 bowlers that you look at and go, how is he not getting picked for England? He's taking wickets left, right, and centre. But you put him into an international environment against international batsmen, and they're getting carted all over the field because just the you don't have the time, the space to think. All the things that you give Freddie Stewart time and space in the backfield. He cuts really good lines. He's obviously big. He's physical. He will decimate club team defences. But if you take that away from him and you force him to do things uncomfortable or less comfortable with, like playmaking behind a blitz defence, it just isn't quite as effective. But that all being said, I don't think you can not pick him at the moment because there's not a glut of really good English fullbacks.
No. Well, other English fullbacks, Josh Hodge, not really proven much this season. Moved to Red Bulls. Wasn't setting things on fire at Chiefs before he left. Carpenter's been injured.
Carpenter's the one that I think has got real potential, but he's his injuries are just sort of hampering him at the moment. Obviously, Hendy is absolutely got potential to do something there. But
You're tossing
whether
Elliot
he's
Daly on the scrap heap.
Well, he's broken his arm.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. Yeah, I keep forgetting. So yeah, it's quite a long injury list for England actually at the moment, isn't there?
Yeah, Malins maybe. I mean, he's
coming into form. He is coming into
maybe
form.
Malins will get another look in if they absolutely decide they need a playmaking fullback. Then Malins probably makes sense to take a look at again. But his chance may have gone.
Yeah, I think you're quite right. Well, Mr. Borthwick, saved you a bit of time there. Just follow our lead. There's your squad. Go do some of the other stuff you need to focus on that you said you're going to work on. We got that covered. And
we'll do selection and we'll negotiate on payment. Yeah,
all in good time. We'll wait for the call. But I think for this week, Rory, I think that's us covered. It feels like we've danced around, the schisms, the stuff going on in the world of rugby.
We want to heal
we're
the schisms of rugby.
We
want to bring people together.
Yeah, we're not here about being divisive. We're not
apart from Bath fans and Quins fans and Chiefs fans and Bristol fans.
Other than all those pockets of fans,
other than all the people we've upset.
Yeah, we want to bring everyone together and move the sport forward. So hey, Andy Good, if you want to come on this podcast and tell us how you're really feeling, that's fine. Squidge, if you want to come on and tell us how you're really feeling, that's fine too.
You're welcome. You're both welcome.
And Monsieur French TV Director, you're welcome too. We're all welcome.
Monsieur Directeur,
you're all welcome here at Rucks Balls and Oval Balls. Now, on that note, Rory, do you have a final thought for the listener?
Bring me more trophies. 3 isn't enough. Lions, Lions, Lions.
And with that, yet another rendition of Lions, Lions, Rucks Balls and Oval Balls has come to a finish this week. We'll be back again next week to talk more rugby stuff. But if you've enjoyed listening, make sure to like, follow, subscribe, and we'll be back again soon. Ta-ra.
Ta-ra.